most of the times I was just depressed and didn't want to live.
I remember feeling literally right before it happened, just could not believe this person was going to do
She
this
was the
to me.
hip-hop soul queen in the globe. A voice that comes only once in a generation, shrouded in platinum records and power, are the only Mary j.bling, so you know they can run out and grab as many as you can. Numerous girls, the number of girl groups, and the turn adjust their hair and tilt their head back. Similar to mine, yet they will never be me. Therefore, for those who knew her well, she was a young Yonkers girl attempting to endure her family, her neighborhood, and she felt angry at him because of her own tragedy. Everything is angry at you and the world. Get to the point where nobody is around. Addiction pursued her via her love for me. The industry, heartbreak did as well. Violence, since I thought I'd rather staying and taking a beating is preferable to let him go, because I thought that if I did as if I were about to die, you know when you feel like, gosh, you realize that love I'll go crazy if you do. Diddy is another her guardian and mentor, and others may even mention her issue because he was a big inspired. As soon as I entered the game, I didn't desire success because I didn't like myself. I was terrified, but after observing him, he had a strong desire for it, and he was it. For the increase, and perhaps the according to some, she saw it all. Claim that she assisted in hiding it, and now fans are inquiring, did she ever actually innocent? The birth of Mary Jane Blige took place on January 11, 1971, at the Forum Medical Center, New York's Bronx, but it wasn't the she grew up in the Bronx, namely in Yonkers. Especially the housing for the Schlobom displays a dilapidated concrete jungle that locals just referred to Slowbomb, as the nickname served as a warning and wasn't cute. Shots rang out like household doorbells. There was no whispering of violence. Roared through thin walls made of paper, and nothing is more prevalent than a broken Mary was a broken spirit, and window was Cora Blige was raised by her mother. Diligent nurse with a strong track record gathering, Cora became fixated with the Gladys Knight and Aretha Franklin, the greats. She would blast their vocals, Chaka Khan, through inexpensive speakers in the hopes that her daughters might be influenced by her strength. However, Cora drank to cope with her own problems. Managed the suffering of a marriage that had destroyed Thomas Blige, Mary's father. Departed when she was only 4 years old. A soldier of the Vietnam War dealing with his personal trauma. Although he played jazz music, unable to keep him grounded, he would suddenly and disappearing like a ghost from their life till he simply quit. Getting angry one day. Angry at him, angry at everything, angry at the world, and there comes a time when it's such as, nobody loves me. Love at home was, although conditional affection was uncommon, Mary would later remark that it was worse outside. The Schlolobomb never had a woman in it. She would stroll by women with black eyes, occasionally with cracked lips, running out of apartments barefoot with half-ripped shirts, yelling for assistance, and nobody showed up, so it became the norm. And Mary finally ceased flinching. At night, when she heard screaming, the trauma didn't simply wait for adulthood. Mary, age 5, was attacked at a party at a family friend's house, a moment that broke her feeling of safety before it had the opportunity to develop. At the age of 5, I was, and I do recall feeling just before it actually happened, I simply couldn't accept that this individual was planning to harm me. Blige outlined how that thing followed me throughout the embarrassment of believing that I was my fault, which made me think I wasn't worth whatever she didn't say. Years of shame-suppressed silence hidden beneath remorse that it was her fault in any way. That secret slowly spread and grew into a permanent injury. She started to think she was useless because she had nothing to give that she might have been entitled to. There was one spot where the agony persisted. Felt secure in the chapel where Mary took sanctuary. Gospel choirs, where she began to sing, break through the suffering. Singing turned into a method of opening a release valve to exhale pressure that left her speechless. She sung at school talent events. She closed her eyes, not because she was timid, but since it was the only method to vanish. When she was 7 years old, she sang Peaches and Herb reunited with her. The audience applauded in elementary school, but Mary was not happy. Instead, she felt vulnerable as she grew older, she developed baggy armor, Tim's jeans, a hat in reverse, and she wasn't dressed like the R&B celebrities on television. Growing up to be a teenager, she wore combat gear because when you are aware that I have experienced a great deal as a youngster and an adolescent that I recently began turn, I simply didn't realize that I just put on baggier jeans, dude. Turns around and Timberlands backwards so that I won't let you know. It took me a very long time to reveal, even put on tight clothing and makeup every the day she visited the projects was you have to appear hard and sound hard for the test. Be tough or you'll be robbed and jumped. Or worse, she frequently got into arguments with boys who girls, including those in her own family. It was survival rather than disobedience, but even as the music eased, the world hardened her. Something within me, even as a young child, was insecure, and I was always depressed and blue all the time, but singing made me felt liberated, which is what I experienced. Mary would accord with everything I held on to. She would sit on the window with her sister. Through broken blinds, still humming, transforming sirens into lullabies and chaos. She didn't aspire to fame. She had escape fantasies, and in 1988 she would unintentionally initiate the action. Out with a record contract, but not a karaoke booth in a shopping center in Westchester was meant to be nothing more than another spend time at Galleria Mall in Westchester. Mary was just dropped at the age of 17. Leaving high school to work at a call center, what a 411 operator does throughout shifts, she was able to outrun her shadows. Someone dared her to try after that day. A new feature in the mall is the karaoke booth. Nestled between kiosks and food courts, after hesitating, she intervened and chose the Rapture has ensnared Anita Baker. Hit the record button and released it, not because she believed that someone would hear it, but since she had to stated that you're wetting that deep, heartbreaking, heartfelt recording was records Uptown never intended to leave, but someone eventually gave it to someone else. Contacted up-and-coming artist Jeff Reddit. Suddenly, Mary's appeared on Uptown Records. After leaving the mall, the sound reached the ears of Uptown's founder, Andre Harold, and first of all, someone in the industry refused to fix her. Didn't hear and wanted to feel her. Suddenly, he heard training instead of he heard a girl who had survived pain. Through someone who had merited her voice. She wasn't in the diva, she lacked glam in the classic sense. Smiley interviews without a pedigree. Since the truth was ragged and raw, Uptown tried her, but there was no significant signing bonus. Just by accident, she joined the celebration. Pathway for artist development at the label, providing backing vocals for Jeff Redd's characteristics of a learner. She was still residing in the projects, drinking despite having depression, having fun while avoiding the trauma that followed her like smoke, but she was now recorded during the initial meetings. Mary had no idea how to behave like a celebrity, and she didn't act as though she was wearing what she always wore, Timberland's baggy jeans. She didn't sing above the backwards hats. She sang through the anguish, and that sincerity caused the entire label to Uptown was confused and unsure about how to sell. She wasn't Janet, she wasn't Whitney. Although she wasn't what R&B had assumed, Puffy Sean Afresh in turn was being observed by someone else. Ambitious, loud and obsessed at the label, Sean Puffy with building legends Combs for Joe to visit Mary J. Tonight BL and everything assembled by first this here and there. The man in the middle is transferring to his son's protege, I suppose. Yes, by the time Sean Puffy reached Combs formally entered Mary's when Uptown Records walls where her voice was already making him vibrate. Been observing her from a distance. This reserved Yonkers girl who declined, who didn't shrink in order to follow the rules or grin at Q, who sang every note flawlessly. Was extracted from an old scar. Puffy then only an intern, but even interns could see a storm approaching. He moved closer. Did he treat Mary differently than others? Refused to request that she sing like someone else. He made no attempt to adorn her with sequins or. He wanted her to be raw, so he smoothed her edges. Desired the Tim Hortons girl who she meant it Puffy, which is why her voice broke. Felt that being vulnerable wasn't the weapon was flawed, and Mary J. Blige he discovered the one, and they created a genre rather than merely tunes. Puffy started making tracks that combined R&B vocals accompanied with gritty hip-hop beats. Street soul is snared by the snapping of strong bass. Mary wasn't obsessing about orchestras as the vocalists that preceded her. She was singing over rattling drum loops like gunshots in the projects where she arrived. What's the 411? Her voice was genuine even though it wasn't clean. And it was unstoppable because of that. In What's the 411 dropped in 1992. The title was a reference to 411, huh? Mary's tenure as a 411 operator during her previous employment and a representation of how she'd always been the young woman who paid attention before she spoke, but now everyone was paying attention to her songs. Real and You Remind Me. Love was more than just hits, it was declarations. This was more than just R&B, was soul and hip-hop, but Mary J. Blige wasn't. She was a movement, yet she was only a fresh voice. She continued to spiral beneath the microphone. Mary, the studio sessions were tumultuous. Was frequently recording while drinking excessively. Through hangovers, occasionally shattering. Puffy shoved her hard down mid-take. Was persistently demanding, but Mary for her agony manifested each time she filled the tracks with her trauma. Heartbreak, shame, and self-loathing. It was all still carried over from childhood. Fans are hidden inside each verse. Didn't merely listen to the music they experienced. Mary was also singing about their suffering. Black females who had never seen themselves in the flawless gloss of pop stars at last got a partner who felt like them, sounded like them, and What's the 411 sold in spite of the chaos. More than 3 million copies, revising the R&B music from the 1990s, but success. Tina and Ike did not yet heal the wound. If whatever deepened it, Mary had managed to get away. Not her demons, but the project's rage rather than the specters in her speech, and as Puffy's popularity rose, so did hers. The fissures as a result of the pressure caused. If Mary's 411 was what? Introduction. Her upcoming album will be Exorcism. And whether Mary J. was changed by Puffy and Blige's picture, Kai Haley was the one who broke her heart as soon as they were. I don't want to perform their duet with them. Anything on the remix of What's the 411, fans of the record saw the tension in a raw sparks of energy that continued through the speakers. Jodeci, KT's group at the time, was R&B redefines male vulnerability. Gospel runs across the street with boots and tattoos. Slang. Katie's rasp and Mary's suffering met in ideal harmony, but how did it feel? The booth's chemistry turned volatile. Behind the scenes, their partnership was passionate right from the beginning. Mary still coping with the trauma she had as a child, and fame's unexpected glare hit hard. Casey, renowned for his untamed enthusiasm, matched together, they were in disarray. Fervent and explosive companions referred to them as the Nines, Ike and Tina. And although that analogy may have appeared casual at first, but it wasn't long before the news began to catch up to the rumors that he mistreated her. Yes, she is. When I'm aware that we was with her, she jumped on the similar to the floor at KC, and it was as she brought us dinner from room service. She uttered every insult and every strike. Each betrayal since, in spite of the fame. Even though everyone was yelling her name, she believed she still didn't love herself. She stayed expecting he would, and she deserved it. Change, considering this to be the price of being liked. I thought I'd rather staying and taking a battering is preferable to let him go, because I thought that if I did as if I were about to die, you know you when you feel like gosh, know that love. If he continues the connection, I'll go crazy. The bond grew stronger. Developed a poisonous pattern. There were laughter is undoubtedly a fun time. Creates the appearance of the sexiest couple in music, but underneath Mary was recovering from the trauma that she had buried for many years. The desertion, the addiction all started to show up. Began consuming more alcohol and using more substances were no longer for enjoyment. There's a story about their being anesthetized. Never confirmed in full, but whispered in the nighttime industry circles in Atlanta. Mary apparently erupted because she was intoxicated. Into a gathering that Casey was at, she screamed while barefoot and with unkempt hair. To calm her, Puff had to yank her into a room. She was down, that's where. Untethered, emotionally unstable, and openly disintegrating, and yet in some way putting up a professional performance throughout it all. Real Love was a hit, and she was soaring. You remind me that she had gone gold. Rising to prominence as the hip-hop soul queen in real time, but Mary is behind the scenes was a woman engaged in combat with herself. To demonstrate her strength despite being split apart behind closed doors, the Caseys' relationship would linger. Intermittently during the most of the mid-1990s. Mary subsequently stated that the last straw wasn't it was an interview when there was a brawl or a punch. In the UK in 1995, Casey was questioned about he shrugged and laughed, saying he was marrying Mary. Mary, the number stated that it wasn't serious. Was observing, and suddenly with her fantasy dashed, she knew she'd remaining attached to someone who never intended to hinder her, and even worse, she'd centered some aspects of her work on that illusion. But this particular chapter wasn't only concerning heartache. It was about the Mary's first encounter with herself. Her writing began to change as a result of the music. Become more somber and her performances more unvarnished. This was no longer the 411 Mary. This was the time of my life, and what followed the storm before the rebirth came next. Beneath the rich vocals and soulful maybe it was a depressive journal. She was struggling with addiction and untreated trauma. Heavy drinking, not at parties, but champagne and cognac alone for breakfast, and she would bring whole bottles to the studio. A depression diary into interviews merely to experience numbness, and the coke lines that were followed became hazy. There were sessions in the studio where she couldn't recall at all. During one especially challenging time in her, Mary later disclosed the apartments. The issue has escalated into this. Compared to me, that was larger. Compared to me, and it was undoubtedly going to, so I thought, this is it, let's go. I also recall sitting on my bed, and I swear, I have no idea what it's like to die. However, I sensed that my soul was attempting to depart from my body, and I was in tears. Saying, please, God, don't let me now desire this. I prayed as I recall. I prayed, saying, God, send me and anyone to assist me. And while everyone, the people around her, said the CD was brilliant, Mary felt misunderstood by Puff. She wasn't merely setting the mood, she was recording a decline with the beat. Joy may have felt cozy, but not all of the lyrics were masked. Others went like, if I can't, how can I love someone else? I care about myself enough to see when it's time to relax, she asked. Openly discussing Casey and their love was disintegrating and full of disputes. Severe insecurity and physical abuse. He had allegedly asked her to marry him with a ring, only to deny it in public in the UK. Days later, that moment came on television. The man she believed she would wed. She had been humiliated by the man she defended in front of millions of people. Kendo Isaac came into the picture quietly. Calm, somebody employed in management. She initially encountered him in circles while performing, working in the studio with Queen Latifah's group. He wasn't ostentatious or fixated on the industry. Mary and I were at ease for the first time and feel sheltered for a long time. The start of anything novel, but it didn't make the suffering go away. By 1995, Mary J. Blige was not only well known, her voice was so ingrained that it was heard everywhere. Face could not be avoided, but behind the Grammy nominations, red carpet endorsements, another thing was solidifying her silence. The empire of the bad boy, the music's involvement in the bad boy empire. Puff No was changing along with the industry. Longer the tenacious intern working, he was now Sean Puffy during studio time. Combs is the CEO of Bad Boy, his own label. Documents he was coordinating cultural dominance influencing Biggie's ascent. Faith Evans was launched, and the commanding he captured the interest of a whole generation. Was no longer merely a producer, he was become a force, and Mary, to whom she remained attached. Even though the general population didn't always notice him, their partnership was never just. You could sense the business in the way the interviews were relocated to the magazine. Explains how Mary was presented, as she wasn't merely a member of Puff's artist, she was a representation of what he may be constructed out of nothing, but she was his, not merely his project. A pawn. Mary was present during the entire beef. The whisper networks, the bargains, and more. Throughout the years, inquiries persisted about what did Mary notice, anything that she knows about. She manages to survive in those inner circles. Assert that Mary attended events that might eventually become the focus of judicial documents. She was there during the documentaries, and there were power struggles going on, and when the masks began to come off. Some even suggested Mary's lack of response over the years has been about survival more than loyalty. She remained silent the entire time. The interviews were carefully selected and brief. However, you're not that near to the fire that doesn't emit smoke, and some think Mary witnessed more than she will ever credit the artist that created the look for Puff. The brand sound was never merely of the individual who created the label was in pain. Repackaging and reshaping a lady while keeping secrets no stylist should know could conceal, and as Puff flew accumulating praise and creating bad, Mary was born into a dynasty, and her scars were not all of them physical, but getting deeper, a few from what she was unable to. By the early 2000s, Mary J. Blige was unknown. Having survived almost all men who her narrative fluff had previously been under control. Proceeded to transform Bad Boy into an empire, but Mary continued to carry the strain, the bruising, the contractions. Whispers, everything from Casey by now had been made public, she said occasionally, but never salaciously, talk about it when she carried the consequences of her statements. She didn't break the air like glass. Share the headlines that she posted since there was nothing else to do, and despite the industry applauding her accomplishments, she was still in danger, not in love, and not in company, not even inside herself. Drinking increased the masks back. Shattered, and one evening she curses at her spirit attempted to depart from her body, which is when she begged for wealth and not fame. However, in order to survive, the music wasn't enough,